Hi everyone, Maddie here again talking about Lab 2, tensile testing. The first thing we'll point out for this lab is all of the equipment that we're going to be using. So this machine is an MTS universal testing machine, and I'll describe the parts of the machine very briefly. So this top part is what's going to be called the crosshead. It's very important because in our readings on the software, we'll be able to see a crosshead reading and an extensometer reading. I'll describe the extensometer in a little bit. So the first part I'll talk about is the load cell. This is very important because we do not want to exceed the force that the load cell can withstand, or else we can actually damage the load cell. So for this particular load cell, we can see the reading on the side back here. And we can see that we cannot exceed 30 kilonewtons or we will damage this load cell. So be sure to not exceed that point. The upper and lower clamps are what we're going to be using to actually put the specimen in place for testing. So we control the movement of the upper and lower clamps with these knobs right here. Let's see. The extensometer is what we are going to be using to hopefully determine where we have our point of fracture and get better data by zooming in to that point. We'll see how it attaches to our specimen in a little bit, but I will point out that this is a very delicate piece of equipment, so be careful when you're operating it. Also notice for this lab I have glasses on. We're dealing with things breaking, so we want to be sure that we don't get any pieces in our eyes. I'll talk about the on and off switches very briefly. So the green is going to be the on and red is going to be the off. Another extremely important piece is our emergency stop button. If we have any issues at any point, just push down on that and we will turn the entire machine off. When we're operating our equipment, if we're seeing some issues or we can't get our remote to work, be sure that we don't have this emergency stop activated. So just come back here, and in order to release it, we'll just push in and twist out. And then we can turn our machine back on. So the next piece of equipment is going to be the remote. So this remote operates the entire machine in the upper and lower clamps moving up and down. So when we attach our specimen and we want to take the upper clamp and move it closer to the lower clamp in order to get the specimen in place, we can use these up and down arrows. Once we get our specimen in place in the upper and lower clamps, we can use this knob, which is called the fine movement control, in order to put the specimen in slight tension. This unlock button we see is what allows the movement to happen on the machine. So if we want anything to be able to move, we need to make sure the green light is on like that. Once we have everything in place and we're ready to start testing, we'll lock everything back up and go to the computer. Okay, another piece of equipment, we are going to have several specimens that are going to be dog bone shapes. You might wonder why we have a dog bone shape, and that's so that we can hopefully have our point of fracture somewhere in this center region. All right, the first thing we're going to do is place the specimen in the upper clamp. Right. Once we get it in place and we get it tightened, we will begin lowering towards our lower clamp. Now we will put it in slight compression. And then once we get this in place, we will come back to our remote and use the fine adjustment knob to put it in slight tension. Now that we have it in place, this is when we'll pick up the extensometer. So we'll carefully orient it on the center of the specimen and then use these metal pieces to gently clamp it in place. Oopsies. The next thing we'll do is take little rubber bands and we'll make sure that our extensometer is securely fastened on our specimen. So we have little hooks on each side of the extensometer, which is where we will place the rubber bands. This little device that kind of looks like a pen is going to be helpful when trying to put our rubber bands onto the extensometer. Okay, so this is what your setup is going to look like, and once we have everything in place, we can see on the side of the extensometer there's a little pin that is attached to a string. We're going to remove this pin. It's very important to do this step or else we won't get any readings from the extensometer on the computer. So this is what our setup's going to look like, and now we'll go to the computer software to see how that is going to operate.
Hi, it's Daniel, and I'll be going over the software used in this experiment. So we'll begin by opening up TW Essential. All right, once we have the software open, we will select the template MTS EM tension. Once we have that open, we will be on the Monitor tab, and here we will enter the appropriate width and thickness that we measured for each of our specimen. Additionally, we will also vary the test rate, or the rate at which the crosshead will move up and down. I will be using a test rate of 0.05 millimeters per second, and a data acquisition rate of 250 hertz. Be sure to adjust the test rate and data acquisition rate appropriately for each specimen, and we will keep the removal point set at 10 millimeters, which means the extensometer will not go beyond 10 millimeters. Now we will zero out the appropriate signals. Remember to zero the appropriate fields at the appropriate times. Before attaching the specimen with the bottom clamp, zero the load. Once the clamp's attached, it'll put the specimen in slight compression. Adjust the specimen to be in slight tension with the fine movement control. And then once that's set up and the extensometer is attached, zero all the appropriate fields as shown here. You want to zero load, crosshead, and extensometer. With all those fields zeroed out, remember to lock the control on the remote. This is very important. Remove the zeroing pin before running, as if it remains in, you will not receive any data. All right, we will now run the test by clicking on the green arrow. We will confirm our measured variables, and we'll begin to watch data being acquired. To remove the sample, put the pin back in the extensometer, remove the rubber bands, remove the extensometer, and release the specimen from the upper and lower clamps. To export your data, go to File, Export, Raw Data, and select which test run you're exporting from. It will default to test run 1. You'll want to select the appropriate result, as if you do not, you will overwrite your previous data. Now select folder, go to desktop. Now select your folder, go to MEMS 205, and select your appropriate group. Save your data there.